Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We will get started right at the top of the hour, so just hang tight and we will start right at 1 o'clock Mountain Time.
Hi, you guys. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can. I'm currently getting us set up for the Facebook live stream right now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You bet.
Carrie and Kelsey, can you see the slides or slide?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, cool. It's giving me a little bit of a hard time.
Good afternoon again, everyone, and welcome to those who are just joining. We are going to get started right at the top of the hour, so please sit tight and we will be underway here shortly. As a reminder, we are accepting comments and questions. There are a couple of ways that you can do that. You can submit your questions through the Q&A feature here within Zoom. You can also use the chat box to submit any comments or requests for conversation topics throughout the session. And if you are joining us through the Facebook Live, you can comment on the Facebook Live feed and we'll be monitoring that for questions as well. Good afternoon and welcome to everyone joining us today for our Indian Ag Rescue Initiative webinar series number 2. We are looking forward to taking some time this afternoon to really dig into how the American Rescue Plan Act will reach our communities of Indian country. We appreciate all of those that have joined us, whether in the Zoom webinar or on Facebook Live. Please know that we are going to be monitoring the Q&A box, the chat box, as well as our Facebook feed to ensure that we try to accommodate answering as many questions as possible. Again, if you have any comments or concerns that you would like us to advance on your behalf, please drop those into those specified areas as well. I will go ahead and kick it over to Colby Duran, our Director of Policy and Government Relations, to get our webinar underway this afternoon. Thank you again, everybody, for joining.
Thank you very much, Kelsey, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Colby Duran, the Director of Policy and Government Relations for the Intertribal Ag Council. This is the second webinar we've done in our new series of the Indian Ag Rescue Initiative to look at some of the resources that are becoming available through the American Rescue Plan and also as part of some of USDA's continuing pandemic assistance response programs for producers and for food purchasing. We're hopeful to walk through some of what the information is of the things that we know so far, what's potentially coming out, and then looking at some of those specific programs. We're going to do a very brief overview of the stuff we talked about on the prior one, specifically on the FSA debt relief payments, additional USDA opportunities, looking at the USDA's new Pandemic Assistance for Producers program, CFAP program, and also opportunities at SBA as well too. But to get us started and to kick us off, I'd like to hand it over to the Intertribal Agriculture Council Executive Director, Carrie Jo Lawrence.
Great, thank you, Colby. And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second part of our webinar series to discuss the American Rescue Plan Act. My name is Carrie Jo Lawrence, and like Colby said, I'm the Executive Director of the Intertribal Agriculture Council. I am Hidatsa, and I was raised on the Mandan Hidatsa Rikara Nation in North Dakota on my parents' ranch between the Newtown and Mandaree areas. I now live in South Dakota with my husband, and we raise cattle and a few horses. Before we get started today and into the new information, I just want to take a step back and briefly talk about the IAC history and basically how and why the IAC came to be. The IAC was born out of the massive ag crisis of the 1980s. During that time, nobody was doing very well. Emergency loans and relief payments came out from the government to assist producers, but Indian producers just couldn't get enrolled in the programs, and nobody really knew why. There was no BIA or USDA emphasis or activity in this important area in Indian country. And the result of that ended up being several 100,000 acres of Indian lands in danger of foreclosure by FMHA. Our Indian farmers and ranchers were actually 5 times more likely to go bankrupt than the national average. Indian producers were categorically excluded from federal emergency aid programs and most USDA commodity or conservation programs. So in that bleak atmosphere, the IAC was founded in 1987 and actually became the only Indian agricultural working group to improve the, to be organized and mandated by Congress. And it was through a recommendation by the National Indian Agricultural Working Group to improve the state of agriculture on Indian lands. And we continue our work to ensure the inclusion and to increase the access to resources of our over 80,000 Native producers and communities. We are working hard to close the gaps created by our past, and the American Rescue Act Plan is definitely a positive step in that direction. Our IAC programs, IAC operations is spread across the 12 regions throughout the country and directly support Indian agriculture with our broad network, which includes programming and youth development, which are cultivating our next generation of leaders. And they have a passion for a diverse aspect in the food and ag system. We have our natural resources programming, which prides itself on meeting our producers where they are, and we work with them to enhance conservation across their land. Our policy and communications program is helping to change the narrative and the legal landscape through creative media and policy advocacy. Our American Indian Foods program is working to assist producers through promoting and training to compete in domestic and global marketplaces. And then we have our technical assistance network. All of our programs are a direct link to our producers and to tribes, and we're there to assist and to increase access and use of USDA programs and services. Our organization is unique in that we have technical assistants in each region, and they know the intricacies of their respective tribes and are there to ensure the cultural relationships are respected and adhered to. Because of our decades-old connections to our tribal producers and communities, we are prepared to ensure our producers are not left out. Just over the last 9 months, the IAC has directly assisted with almost 700 COVID relief program applications, and right around over $10 million, almost $11 million in assistance to tribal producers. CFAP 1 and 2, the PPP and EIDL are just a few of those COVID relief programs that we've been heavily involved with. We're going to be doing some outreach again for the CFAP 2 program, and that just reopened for producers who may have missed the deadline and missed that short window that FSA had. So we're going to be out in the field assisting to get more producers signed up. And if you are not yet signed up for CFAP 2 and want more information, be sure to reach out to your regional TA. You can contact us at our webpage at indianag.org. Look under who we are, and then you'll find your regional technical assistant. But really anybody that you contact will be able to help you out and get you pointed in the right direction. Make sure to get signed up for our newsletter. That comes out, our newsletter comes out every Friday and is full of really great information and up-to-date things that you can be looking for. We are super excited to launch our new Indian Egg Rescue Initiative page. We believe information sharing about what's coming out for assistance and how to access is of primary importance. So once you go to our indianegg.org, our new Egg Rescue Initiative page is our landing page, and you'll be right there, and we'll have the most up-to-date information on what's coming out through the Rescue Act, and that'll be updated as soon as we know new information. It'll go on that page, so make sure to come back as often as possible. So I'm going to hand it over to Colby, and we can further talk about the American Rescue Plan Act. So Colby.
Thank you very much, Carrie Jo, and all the information that we're going to be putting out will be available on the website that Carrie Jo just mentioned. So it'll be continually updated as soon as new programs are announced and funding opportunities become available through USDA. To go over it briefly, and we talked about this in our first webinar, but just I know we'll probably have some new folks on here. The American Rescue Plan Act that was signed into law in March included $16 billion overall to USDA. The top two things that we wanted to highlight on here, and we talked about in depth on our last webinar, but just to touch on, is the FSA loan debt relief payments for socially disadvantaged producers, which equals about $4 billion. So this authorizes payments of 120% to socially disadvantaged producers for farm loans. Those are also FSA guaranteed loans through private lenders, and the Commodity Credit Corporation farm storage facility loans. These are loans that were open as of January 1st, 2021. They're still looking for information and comments on these. So please, if you have any comments or questions or things you'd like to have highlighted to FSA, please send those forward. We'd be glad to include those in the comments that we're submitting because we want to make sure, and I know FSA wants to make sure that they're developing and setting up this program in a way that helps support producers as best as it can. There's also an additional $1 billion for technical assistance funding. And this is a question that we get a lot because not many people there are several people that aren't FSA borrowers anymore. They may have not gotten into the program. They have graduated out of the program. So in that $1 billion includes some financial assistance to socially disadvantaged former farm loan borrowers that may have suffered adverse related effects or past discrimination or bias, outreach, mediation, training, and capacity building and other technical assistance support. And as USDA is developing its farm, some of its other programming, we know that the $1 billion that they're looking at is something that they're probably going to be putting out after they do the FSA debt relief payments and getting those out there as well too. So putting in comments and concerns about how we've been impacted by the pandemic and the specific assistance that your operation and that you need as part of this are incredibly important to help shape these programs. Also included in the $1 billion for that are grants and loans to help support land access for socially disadvantaged farmers, ranchers, and forest owners. And then funding for ag research, education, extension, scholarships, and also internships at 1994 tribal colleges and universities, Alaska Native and Native Hawaiian serving institutions, 1890s, land grants, Hispanic serving institutions, and insular area institutions as well. We have more information on this on the slides that we did on our first webinar, and those are already posted on the Indian Ag Rescue website. And the other thing that's also created here is the creation of one or more equity commission to address longstanding racial equity issues and barriers at USDA. For some of the other components that were in the American Rescue Plan is an additional $3.6 billion in food and ag commodities purchasing and distribution. And so this is the purchasing of produce, dairy, seafood, eggs, meat, grants and loans to small and mid-sized processors to respond to COVID-19. These are things for worker health and safety. Also additional loans and grants to help maintain and improve the food chain and food supply. We know that AMS is working through developing what some of these programs are like, and hopefully there'll be some information coming out about that in the coming weeks or maybe in the next week or two. And the other component, which we touched on the last webinars, there's a new $500 million emergency pilot program grants through the Rural Development Department, which are aimed at really increasing capacity for vaccine distribution, medical supply and support, telehealth, but also includes supporting nutrition assistance and any other things that the secretary deems are necessary and appropriate to help with some of the pandemic responses. So this is another opportunity to be able to look at to help build some infrastructural support necessary as part of the continuing pandemic responses. For some of the newer funding that's included in here, and this comes from the Consolidated Appropriations Act that was passed at the end of last year, there's an additional $6 billion in that, and also combined with some other funding. And these are for new and what they're calling modified programs. So these are programs that either don't exist or are built upon other programs. We don't know what the timeline is to get these out, but we know that USDA is very interested in getting information on how they can best support the needs of producers. Because of how this programming is structured and how the funding works, they're going to have to go through rulemaking processes for most of these. So it's going to take a little while to get this out. So the time is really ripe now to be able to get the information in. So these include things that support for dairy farmers, support for producers that had to euthanize livestock and poultry, things like biofuels and energy, specialty crops in particular, things that support beginning farmers, local, urban, and organic farms, supporting the cost for organic certification, looking at ways to expand CFAP into ways that were not part of the announcements that were done before, and looking to see maybe if there's going to be a CFAP 3 or another version of a CFAP-like payment product to help support livestock producers and dairy, timber harvesting and hauling, supporting PPE and getting those measures to food and farm workers, supporting the overall resiliency of the food supply chain, and particularly meat and poultry operations and processing, and also supporting interstate shipment of those. There's also infrastructure to help support the donation and distribution of perishable commodities, looking like food donation, distribution through farm to school, restaurants, and other community organizations, as well as reducing food waste. So these are a long list of items, but it's also not exclusive. So there's other things that USDA is potentially interested in doing. And so if there are things on here that may be either new or related to some of the programs that you are familiar with or use or access already, these might be ways to be able to look at how can some additional funding help support any particular actions or items regarding your operation and what it really is needed the most, especially right now. As part of this package as well too, there's an additional $500 million in new funding for programs that already exist. So several of these may be ones that you already use, apply for, or follow, and are looking to put applications in. There's $100 million in additional funding for the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program, $75 million for the Farmers Opportunities Training and Outreach Program, the recently combined 2501 and Beginning Farmer and Rancher programs through the 2018 Farm Bill. Another additional $100 million in the Local Agricultural Marketing Program, the LAMP program, with value-added marketing support, as well as providing localized investments for food systems and regional distribution of food. $75 million for the Gus Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program, the Double Up Snap Bucks program that exists at a lot of farmers markets and in retail stores. $20 million for APHIS for health and inspection. Another $20 million for agriculture research service as well. $28 million to the National Institute of Food and Agriculture for grants to state departments of agriculture on for farm stress, and approximately $80 million in payments to domestic users of upland cotton and long staple cotton. So those are some of the newer programs that have been discussed and that are available as well. I know we're getting a lot of questions in here, and we're glad to take them all at the end as well too, as long as to hear from you and get your input. But I'd like to hand it back over to Kelsey to go over some of the CFAP programs and some of the other opportunities as well.
Thank you very much, Colby. I'm Petu Ashte, everyone. Good day. My name is Kelsey Scott. I'm the Director of Programs for the Intertribal Agriculture Council. And I also am a cow-calf rancher here on the Cheyenne River Sioux Indian Reservation. So I want to thank you all again for taking some time to join us this afternoon. A couple of updates surrounding the CFAP Coronavirus Food Assistance Program and how the recent act is going to impact or hopefully better reach those that haven't already been able to access CFAP. There is what I'm hearing them refer to as the top up CFAP 1 cattle payments. So anybody that had submitted a CFAP 1 application last year that was approved will automatically qualify for an increased payment based on the impact that has been better dialed in. Those dollar amounts are based on the class and age of livestock. And again, these are all things that you've already had to have applied for when it comes to CFAP 1. Eligible producers do not need to submit a new CFAP 1 application or take any action. Only the producers who previously applied for CFAP 1 are eligible to receive this additional payment. CFAP 2 opened back up on April 5th for 60 days. So you do not have to have applied for CFAP 1 in order to apply for CFAP 2. So if you missed the deadline for submitting an application for CFAP 1, please take this extension of deadline as your opportunity to go in and to apply for CFAP 2.0. Eligible producers can apply online at farmers.gov/pandemic-assistance/CFAP. Farmers.gov is a phenomenal website with access to resources and information around the CFAP program and what the eligible commodities are. They even have an online spreadsheet that you can download, which is basically a trial application where you can start to fill in your inventory numbers to project what your assistance dollar value will be. IAC has conducted some coronavirus food assistance program specific webinars. You can find these specific webinars on our YouTube channel, Indian Ag on YouTube, or you can actually visit indianag.org/Indian Ag Rescue Act Initiative, and you will be able to follow through the webinars where we hosted Farm Service Agency staff in helping us to navigate and understand what CFAP 1 is, what CFAP 2 is, and what the disaster set aside option with Farm Service Agency is. Please keep in mind that when we recorded our CFAP 2.0 webinar, it was last year when the deadline had not yet been extended. So remember, CFAP 2.0's deadline is reopened and you can now apply if you have not yet applied for CFAP 2. An additional resource that we highly encourage all listeners to look into is the Paycheck Protection Program made available through the Small Business Association. PPP's deadline for application has also been extended. This program is now available for sign up through June 30th, 2021. We have an IAC producer resource which talks you through how to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program, made available on our website at www.indianag.org/PPP. A couple of things to remember here is that there's some terminology with the PPP program that is often confused. There is such a thing as the first round of applications that opened up back in 2020, where individuals for the first time were able to apply for the PPP. And in January of 2021, the second round of PPP applications opened up, and this round actually included the chance for farmers and ranchers who file a Schedule F to apply for Paycheck Protection Program assistance. This amount, this dollar value that you can apply for, is based on your Schedule F, line 9, your gross income on your Schedule F. So you do not have to have an indicated payroll on any of your tax documents. This application for the second round allows you the chance to consider your profit or loss from farming, Schedule F, line 9, as the dollar value, which then provides the basis for the amount of money that you can qualify for through the PPP program. Again, you can visit our website, indianag.org/PPP, for a how to apply video. There's also the Economic Injury Disaster Loan available through the Small Business Association. EIDL has been extended as far as applications being available goes, and we've also recently been notified of an increase in available funding of to loan recipients. So many of you may have accepted an SBA EIDL loan. When you accepted the loans, the loan limitation was at $150,000 restricted per borrower. That was based on a 6-month loan or a 6-month impact in your business. Now, SBA is reconsidering loan limits, appreciating that there's been 24 months of impact on our businesses due to COVID, and the maximum loan amount is $500,000. If you've already accepted an EIDL loan, you can request an increase in your existing EIDL loan by emailing COVID EIDL increase requests at sba.gov. In the subject line, you need to include EIDL increase request for, and then you would insert your 10-digit SBA EIDL application number. In the email body, you need to include identifying info related to your case, including your application number, your loan number, your business name, business address, business owner's name, and phone number. Please do not include financial documents or tax records with this initial request. COVID idle increase requests at SBA.gov will reach out directly to you when it is time for additional documentations to process your idle loan increase request. Please be cognizant of who you are corresponding with, and remember that you can contact the local SBA office to ensure that the emails you're receiving are valid and sent by an SBA representative and that they are not spam or any sort of phishing scam. One good standard practice to do is to ensure that all of the emails you're receiving and replying to have the email address of the addressee at sba.gov. And now it is our time to hear from you. We have done a brief review of all that we know, which is to come, and even offered some of our interpretation of how some of these programs will be able to be rolled out and reach you as our producers in Indian agriculture. And now we need to hear from you. We really appreciate all of you that have taken the time to go ahead and put put your questions into the Q&A and the chat box. We're going to start working through those questions as they have come in. Colby, I'm going to send a couple of these questions your way right off the bat to get started. Kimberly asks, does the USDA loan forgiveness extend to tribal governments?
Thank you for that question, Kimberly. So the loan forgiveness would be for if a tribal government itself is a producer and applied and holds either an FSA guaranteed loan or an FSA loan itself, or holds a FSC guaranteed loan from a private bank, then it would be eligible. I don't know how many that would apply to, but in that set of circumstances, if the tribe was a producer and applied for it like that, then they would. So it's really about the type of loan versus the entity that holds the loan. So if it's an FSA loan, FSA guaranteed loan, commodity credit corporation, farm storage facility loan, then it would be eligible. And those loans, again, had to be open as of January 1, 2021.
Thank you, Colby. Nathan asks, will there be debt relief for farm loans from Farm Credit, CCC, that aren't FSA guaranteed?
Thank you for that question. So the only loans that are included in debt relief, and this debt relief and debt payments provision, and these are the ones that were passed by Congress, are FSA loans. So we know we've gotten questions about loans from private lenders that are either ag loans but aren't FSA guaranteed, and if they aren't, they most likely would not qualify for that. I would think the best thing to do is to double check, is to reach out to your loan officer and to your lender just to make sure. But if it doesn't fit within the types of categories of loans, it most likely would not qualify for the debt forgiveness that's through FSA.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Colby. There's a question here. If you were a Keeps Eagle client, are you still eligible for Farm Service Agency loans? Can an individual tribal member get help for needed infrastructure on his or her subsistence farm, like the purchase of a small utility tractor?
Good question. So I'm trying to remember now, and if Kelsey or Kira, if you remember, if getting a payment from Keeps Eagle, I don't think it bars you from participating in FSA. Is that correct, Carrie?
Correct. Yep. You can still participate in all the FSA programs. As long as you're eligible for Farm Bill programs, you can participate.
Oh, and the other half of that question, get help for infrastructure on their subsistence farm, like the purchase of a small utility tractor. I think those would be something that would be open for FSA loans and other loan opportunities as well. Are there any other programs at USDA that might help with that as well?
Not specialty that are, I would just think it would be maybe a direct loan.
I think that direct loan is probably your best bet, but you could definitely look into other state-based opportunities with rural development or even NRCS that could contribute to the feasibility of that plan. Jace asks if there are examples of specialty crops that are covered by CFAP 2.0. Where would we maybe find that information?
Sure. So all of the eligible. Oh, it looks like Carrie, you have it actually in the chat. Did you want to?
Yep, I just copied the address down there in the chat. So you could visit farmers.gov, and then there's several different categories there that you can click on. And yeah, like for the specialty crops, you know, there's more than 230 fruit, vegetable, horticulture, and tree nut commodities there. So farmers.gov and /CFAP2.
Thank you very much. Shannon mentioned that they accepted a PPP loan when the second round opened. They did not sign up for the first round, and they are wondering if they will be eligible for a second draw of their PPP loan. Thank you for bringing this question up, and I apologize for not clarifying that on the page about the Paycheck Protection Program. So the Paycheck Protection Program, in order to apply, basically all you had to have was a Schedule F tax return to be able to apply for your first draw. You can apply for a second draw on or a second loan, essentially, at the end of the time frame required for you to spend out your initial loan. But you do have some stricter eligibility requirements. You have to be able to verify that from one production cycle to the next, you realized a 25% or greater impact on your business as a result of coronavirus. So one way to compare this would be to look if you applied for the PPP second round for your first draw using your 2019 taxes. You can compare your 2019 taxes to your 2020 taxes. And if your Schedule F in 2020 indicates a 25% less value than what your 2019 taxes offer, then you are eligible to apply for the second draw. Similarly, if you can, perhaps that doesn't show meet the 25% requirement, but you can compare one quarter in 2019 to the identical quarter in 2020 to indicate a 25% loss at the quarterly level for cash inflow and outflow, then you can qualify through that eligibility restriction for a second draw of the PPP. I would advise that the absolute best way to get clarity on this is to work through your local lender where you have your SBA loan, to ask them what documentation you need to find to prove or seek out your eligibility for the second draw. I also believe that there is a really unique opportunity for anybody who needs assistance. Please reach out to us at IAC. We have helped so many producers to process these PPP applications. So, and we are seeing that there's uniqueness from one lender to the next and how they process the applications, or what that process for paying out and dispersing those loan funds looks like. So really what we would help you to do is to guide that conversation with your local lender to ensure that we're meeting their expectations, so that when you are ready to apply for forgiveness, you can apply for forgiveness. Another thing about the PPP is that you can apply for debt forgiveness for the PPP loans, and then you can basically have that loan debt wiped off of your books. There is a question here, Colby, that gets at the timing of accepting loans. It says, I have an operating loan that I took out in November 2020 for funding for the year. Will my loan be paid in full, or will it only pay for the amount I used up until January 1, 2021?
Thank you for that question. So if you took out a brand new FSA loan on November 2020, that loan, because it would have been open as of January 1st, 2021, from what we know in the language of the act and from what information has been released so far, is that the payment would come on the full amount of the loan that's owed. So whatever you owe to the to FSA would be the payment of that plus 20%. And it would be that amount that is also owed on January 1, 2021. And to combine this with another question that we get a lot too, we know a lot of people have payments that are coming up, or maybe you have to make in the next several days or weeks, and without having not knowing when the debt relief will come, folks are asking a lot about, if I have a payment, do I need to make it? FSA put out some guidance in a letter to banks, which is on our website, that mentions that their recommendation is that if you have a payment due, that you should make your regularly scheduled payment. The thought behind that is that if you owe $10,000 in your loan on January 1st, 2021, and had to make a payment of $1,000, you would likely get back that $10,000 that you owed plus the 20% on January 1st, not getting back just $9,000 if you made a $1,000 payment. So the key number is here is the amount of money that was owed on January 1st, 2021.
Thank you very much, Colby. There's a question here from Melissa. Relative to the direct loans being forgiven, do they include farm ownership loans which cover land and facilities, and farm operating loans which include livestock and equipment? And a follow-up question, will direct FSA youth loans be covered as well?
Thank you for that question, Melissa. I think that all of those will be covered, and we know for sure that we've heard specifically that youth loans will be covered as well too.
Thank you very much, Colby. From Brock, will debt relief be available to families who have co-borrowers that are non-native on FSA guaranteed loans? For example, wife is enrolled and husband is non-Indian.
That's a good question, Brock. It focuses on, I think, who holds the note for the loan. And so in cases like this, where there might be multiple folks that hold the note, I would think, would check with the FSA office once guidance is released. But because it is for socially disadvantaged producers and loans held by socially disadvantaged producers, so if there is a socially disadvantaged producer that holds that loan, it most likely would be eligible for it. We haven't seen that specific scenario and information announced, but we know it's a question that will come up, and I think is one to consider. One thing that FSA has put out too is that there may be several native producers that haven't that didn't put or select that they were a socially disadvantaged producer when they went and received their FSA loan initially. To do that, FSA is saying that folks that are in that position should go fill out a form that's online. We have a link to that on our website as well too, that links you to the FSA website. So that way your status is included as part of that. And so hopefully that will be able to help clear up any confusion or misconceptions.
Thank you very much, Colby. We have a question here that says, is there any relief for native ranchers that don't have FSA loans anymore, but do have collateralized loans with a bank? I think that what I would offer is to absolutely look at the Small Business Administration's Economic Impact Injury Disaster Loan, as well as the SBA's PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, to see what resources may be available for you. The EIDL loans that are being offered or extended have better lending terms than a large majority of the financial institutions that we know our Indian ag producers are currently working with. So it's worth looking into to see what you're eligible for simply by applying for the SBA EIDL loan. By applying, you are not locked in to accepting. You will likely qualify though for an offer. And from that offer, you can do some financial planning to decide if that is the best route for you and your business. Again, the Paycheck Protection Program with the Small Business Administration is a forgivable expense or forgivable loan as long as you expense the loan funds out for payroll related expenses associated with paying yourself a paycheck. So please consider looking at those two resources, and you can find more information out about those at indianag.org. There was a question here. My second CFAP 1 payment was applied to my FSA loan involuntarily. Can that be reimbursed back to me? That is a fairly specific question. I would anticipate that perhaps the best path there would be to communicate directly with the USDA service center that you typically work with. If you reach out to us at IAC, we would be happy to help you in that conversation. Another thing to consider is if you had an FSA loan as of January 1, 2021, the indebtedness to you at that given day is how we interpret the debt relief will be forgiven to producers. So even if your CFAP payment was applied to your loan involuntarily, given that scenario and how we interpret it, you would essentially get that potential payment back. And so it's a very specific question, and I would ask that you follow up with us if we could provide you further assistance. All right. We have a question here from Tex. Is CFAP 2 the same financial compensation as CFAP 1? And is the deadline June 5th? Colby, would you want to answer that?
Sure. I think the financial compensation's structured differently in that, and so I would refer to particularly the types of production that you're involved in with that, and what those payments are for that. We know that they made a lot of adjustments after CFAP 1 because of the issues that existed with that, and some of the items and commodities that were not included. For the deadline being June 5th. So when they originally announced this, they said it would be open for 60 days. What it now currently is said, and what we've heard from several folks and folks that we've talked with and worked with, and it says online, and at a call that AMS did earlier today, an open call, said that it's 60 days, but it could be open for longer. So online it actually says available until close. So the opportunity is June, the 60 days would be June 5th, but the 60 days deadline doesn't look like it's on there. So, but we would encourage folks to apply as soon as possible for it, just to make sure that happens in case they do close it even after 60 or more days, but it looks like it'll be open further. One thing we do know, because we got this question on the last webinar, and has come in today, and from a couple different folks, is that there will most likely be another type of program. We don't know if it'll be like a CFAP 3 or some other payment program, or how that would be structured, but there might be something else after this opportunity. However, CFAP 2 opportunity exists right now, so we heavily encourage everybody who qualifies to apply for that program now and apply to that program early. As there isn't a deadline for it yet, but just to ensure that you get into the process and get the payments.
Thank you very much. Again, you can extend your questions and comments to us through the chat box or the Q&A feature. And if you're joining us on Facebook Live, you can comment right on the thread there. Huey mentions that they heard some of the SBA loans will be forgiven. Is this true?
So I think that it could be true, but we don't know for sure if some of the SBA loans will be forgiven. But we're monitoring and taking a look at it and seeing what might come up with that. But we don't know for sure if they'll be forgiven.
Thank you very much for that. And another thing that I just want to make sure we cover for everybody who has questions about the debt relief. I know that it's frustrating that we don't have finite answers around any of this yet. I think that probably the sanest advice we could provide is to focus on what is within our control. One action that you can take is to reach out to your local USDA service center that you work with to ensure that you actually have a socially disadvantaged designation form completed at your FSA office, so that as the debt relief begins to be administered, everything that you need is in place at the office to be included in that debt forgiveness.
Kelsey, I saw a question here about accessing the LAMP program and if it excludes or includes seafood production. And just wanted to highlight that because we know that I don't think it excludes seafood at all, but it's really a program that focuses on farmers market promotion program and the local food promotion program. And so it's helping support businesses and enterprises that do sort of like direct to consumer marketing, which has become so critical now. So if that's something that your productions engaged in or interested in expanding into or growing out what you're currently doing, would definitely recommend folks to look at that program as well. The program has existing and recurring funding, but with the additional $100 million it got, we know that there'll be a lot of additional opportunities. And through the last farm bill, there's specific inclusion to support tribal producers to be part of those programs. So just wanted to highlight that as we saw a question asked about that.
Thank you very much for catching that, Colby. We have two scenarios requesting clarification in the Q&A. One is if I had an FSA loan on January 1, 2021, that was paid off in March of 2021, will this individual be reimbursed for that payoff amount? Another question is if they had a loan that they paid for in November of 2020, would they be reimbursed for the payment made to that loan? And correct me if I'm wrong, Colby, but how it is written, it is based on the amount of indebtedness that the socially disadvantaged producer carried in their name with FSA as of January 1, 2021.
Yes, Coach, you're absolutely right. That's exactly it. So that's the key date. And so what the balance sheet showed that was owed as of January 1st, 2021.
Okay, thank you very much. There are several questions coming in throughout the Q&A and the chat box about what types of farm loan programs are available for this specific different components of working on an ag operation or a food subsistence operation. I would highly encourage you to visit our YouTube channel. Indian Ag is how you can find our YouTube channel. You can also visit indianag.org for a direct link to our YouTube channel, as well as a direct link to our online e-learning platform, where we do a deeper dive into the specific lending and borrowing opportunities that exist out there for producers to pursue loans to expand or enhance their operations. There's questions also, Colby, about the potential for infrastructure development dollars coming out through this debt relief package. Can you speak a little bit to some of the opportunities that may exist and how individuals can go about pursuing them?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question, Kelsey, and whoever asked it in the chat. There's a lot of good potential for opportunities for that. So when looking at some of the different components in the earlier slides about the additional $6 billion that is invested in sort of what they're calling new or existing programs. Some of the things they talk about are things that help support meat processing, entering food into commerce, supporting supply chain, supporting infrastructural components. So there are some of the existing pots of money that existed within rural development and the value-added grant program, which can be infrastructural investments. But I think there'll be some additional opportunities that will hopefully be expanded out. We don't know exactly what those will look like as they'll have to go through the rulemaking process to make some of these determinations and to have an opportunity to be able to show what they're looking to doing. But while it might take a little bit of time, the rulemaking process will actually allow for some additional direct input into what those programs should look like, how they're structured, how they should be accessed, and what they are targeting. So now is a good time to if you have any particular infrastructure needs or particular investments to please send those forward to us. We're glad to include those in comments that we put forward. Also, when the rulemaking processes come up, and we'll make sure that those get out to everybody on our website and through our social media channels and newsletters as well. So there is a lot of opportunity for this too. There's also going to be a potentially another bill that gets passed, or a bill that they're going to be considering this summer, focused on infrastructure. We know that agriculture infrastructure is going to be part of that. And I think you've seen this administration talk about almost everything in the scope of infrastructure because it has that type of framing. So looking at what those are, so there may be even some additional infrastructural opportunities that come from Congress as they start to consider what those packages might look like and programs and funding might look like.
Thank you very much for that, Colby. And for everybody that's been asking for increased access to infrastructure for meat processing facilities, commercial training kitchens, storage for food, food preparation centers or food distribution centers. Absolutely, these are the comments that we really value and appreciate coming in, because this is specific language and resources that we can advance to DC as being requested by our membership and our community members all across the country. There's a question, Colby, and I'm hoping that maybe you can provide some clarity as far as we know. If an individual made their annual payment after January 1, would that individual, and I'm assuming this is to Farm Service Agency, or that they have either a guaranteed loan or a direct loan from Farm Service Agency, would they be repaid the interest that they had to pay on that loan, or is it only the amount of principal paid?
That's a good, I think so. I would go back to saying, if you made I think that you would get the entirety of the payment back, because it would be focused on what you'd owed. So like again, if you owed that $10,000 on January 1 and you made a payment on in March of $1,000, regardless of how that $1,000 was split between principal and interest, the amount of money that you would be paid back would be based upon the indebtedness of that, the indebtedness and that was owed as of January 1.
Thank you very much. All right, one more question about what is the time frame on the socially disadvantaged debt relief payments? Have you had any any knowledge gained from this in your time in DC, Colby?
So the phrase that we keep hearing repeatedly from Secretary Vilsack onto folks throughout USDA is that the debt relief payments are weeks away. So that's what we've been going by. Now that could mean it could be a couple of weeks away, or it could be 3 to 4 more weeks away. You know, I would think that there would hopefully be something done within the next several weeks. as we know that they're looking to collect information as soon as possible. But we don't know the time of when FSA's debt relief and debt payments program is going to be announced and be live. We do know that USDA is doing other initiatives as well too, and that those are coming out in the next week or two or so. So I think we're going to start to see these coming and rolling out pretty quickly. Just as soon as the CFAP payment came live on Monday, USDA did a webinar today about it and talked a little bit about that information that was available for that. They also mentioned that for some of the grants and loan programs, and Carrie or Kelsey, please correct me if I heard this wrong on the webinar, that they said that they might look to open those up by or start to announce those things by April 30th. So that's only a few weeks from now. So I think as we're starting to see what the timeline looks like on some of the other programs and opportunities, that kind of helps shapes it a little bit for all. So when I do say weeks away, it is, I think, unfortunately, that I think that recent, but I guess that soon, but also potentially that long as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Colby. We are nearing the end of the question and conversation topics that have been presented. So one more time, I'm just going to go ahead and ask you to finish up any last minute questions that you may have. And we can make sure to continue to fold in the input, the comments, and the questions that we receive into our future correspondence. There are several ways that you can get a hold of us here at the Intertribal Agriculture Council. First and foremost, probably our most valuable resource is visiting indianag.org, where is our one-stop shop. We will host or coordinate any communications or information that we have through this website. You can also visit indianag.org/indianagrescue to ensure that you have the most up-to-date information that we have available to us made available to you. Carrie and Colby, I will kick it over to you to close us out of today's webinar.
Like, who goes first? I just want to thank everybody for coming out and participating. The concerns that you have, the suggestions that you have are so valuable. If you have any comments that you want us to include, please make sure to reach out and let us know what they are so we can include them. And reach out anytime. We sure appreciate you. Thanks.
Thank you all for coming, and just to reiterate everything that Carrie and Kelsey said, please never hesitate to reach out. The information is out there, and we really appreciate all of the input, and we'll be sure that this gets included in all of the correspondence that we put forward to USDA. And if there's anything else that comes to mind, please send that forward as well too. We're hopeful that this Indian Ag Rescue Initiative will be an ongoing, continually updated platform. So there'll be hopefully a consolidated place to get information regarding how to get some access to the support and funding that's available through these programs. So thank you all very much, and looking forward to connecting with you all soon.
Have a great rest of your week.